Out in the desert, silence isn't freedom, it's control. Across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California, there are places no one can enter. No fences, no signs, just coordinates that disappear when you search for them. Officially, they don't matter. Unofficially, they hum. These are the forbidden zones, land sealed not for what's inside, but for what might still be moving underneath. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never trust an empty desert again. The Silverbow Restricted Trench. 60 miles east of Tonopah, deep inside the Nevada desert, lies a stretch of sand that glows. Not brightly, not like fire or moonlight, but like cold electricity under glass. Locals call it the Silverbow Trench, though it doesn't appear on any geological map. In satellite images, it looks like a long scar cut into the desert, 200 yards across, almost half a mile long. Official records describe it as a subsidence depression, a leftover from underground tests. But the Department of Energy lists no detonations anywhere near it. Still, the site remains fenced, and sensors around the perimeter flash red when approached. The glow was first noticed in 1983 by a survey pilot flying low over the range at dawn. He reported a soft pulsing blue light rising from the ground like heat waves. When a second aircraft flew over days later, instruments malfunctioned, radios fuzzed, and the plane's altimeter dropped to 0 for 6 seconds. Since then, at least a dozen drone operators have tried to capture footage of the trench. None succeeded. Every drone loses battery power instantly above the coordinates, even with fresh cells. The footage always ends the same way. A faint hum, a flicker of blue, and total shutdown. When researchers from the University of Nevada tried to approach on foot in 1999, they found the temperature readings inverted. The surface was colder than the surrounding sand by nearly 20 degrees. The light increased when clouds passed overhead, as though it fed on shadow instead of sun. Samples taken from the edge contained high concentrations of fused silica, the byproduct of extreme heat, yet there was no radiation, no burn pattern, and no visible melt. It looked as if the ground had liquefied once, and then frozen in place. The Bureau of Land Management sealed the area shortly after, citing subsurface instability, but leaked memos mentioned something else. Persistent photonic activity at non-thermal wavelengths, source unidentified. That phrase, photonic activity, appears in only 3 other DOE documents, all related to experimental laser mapping from the 1970s. None of those projects were based in Nevada. Truckers on Highway 6 still talk about it, the faint blue shimmer that creeps along the horizon some nights, bending the air above the flats. One driver described stopping to watch it from a distance. It wasn't light, it was reflection, like the ground was shining back at something we couldn't see. Geologists now theorize the trench may sit above an unknown mineral pocket, capable of reflecting ambient electromagnetic fields. But that doesn't explain why GPS units freeze, or why no echo returns when you shout into the pit. Sound simply doesn't come back out. Satellite imagery taken in 2018 revealed something new, a faint secondary glow, 20 yards north, shaped like a perfect circle. It wasn't there in previous years. The next image, 3 months later, showed it gone, replaced by a shadow that didn't match the time of day. The area remains closed, labeled restricted for safety, but the latest environmental report includes one chilling line: light emission levels unchanged. Activity continues at depth. Whatever's happening under Silverbow hasn't stopped. It's just waiting for dark. The dead grid of Utah Range. Somewhere west of Delta, Utah, lies a patch of desert where nothing electronic survives. Phones die, GPS units freeze, compasses spin once and stop. It's called the dead grid, an area roughly 3 miles wide, invisible from the air but marked by an invisible pulse, strong enough to erase navigation itself. The first reports came from hikers in 2009 who posted online about losing service in a perfect circle of desert. They described hearing a faint rhythmic buzz, like a heartbeat inside the sand. At first, it sounded like myth, until the state survey team went to check it. Their instruments lasted exactly 40 seconds inside the zone. Then every device, magnetometer, radio, laptop, went dark. When recovered, the data logs revealed something no one expected. Every sensor had recorded a synchronized signal just before failure, a short burst at exactly 72 beats per minute. a pulse. Technicians ran the test again days later, bringing analog compasses instead of electronics. The compasses spun 180 degrees, paused, then returned to true north, repeating the motion every 8 seconds. Even more unsettling, the movement stopped completely whenever someone stepped into the center of the circle. Standing there, the air felt dense, sound muted. One ranger described it as pressure without weight. Another said he could feel the pulse in his ribs. No magnetic ore deposits were found, no underground cables, no military installations within 50 miles. Still, the Bureau of Land Management quietly reclassified the site as environmentally sensitive area, restricted access. Publicly, the reason given was fragile soil crust. Privately, contractors were hired to bury small black towers at each perimeter point, solar-powered sensors that transmit continuously, but no agency claims ownership. A leaked maintenance document from 2015 refers to the site as Project D-Grid and includes one unsettling line under observed phenomena. Interference pattern matches recorded human cardiogram, 72 BPM. Suggest non-geologic origin. Locals near Delta have their own name for it, the Heartbeat Desert. They say animals avoid it, especially horses. One rancher swore his cattle froze mid-step when crossing the invisible line, as if the air had thickened around them. Drone footage from 2019 captured something strange during a sandstorm. Waves of dust rising in evenly spaced ripples, forming concentric circles that expanded outward like sound on water. When slowed down, the pattern repeated precisely 72 times per minute. The US Geological Survey later claimed it was wind resonance, but meteorological models can't produce such consistent timing without mechanical input. And there's one more detail the government never mentioned. During the final survey, before the zone was sealed, one geologist kept a handheld recorder running on battery. The device stopped inside the grid as expected, but when restarted outside, it played back 19 seconds of faint audio. The sound? A low, slow thumping. Not mechanical, not wind, organic. Each beat slightly out of phase with the human heart, like an echo trying to sync, but never quite matching. Whatever powers the dead grid isn't electrical. It's rhythmic, and if the desert has a pulse, something under it is still alive. The Carrizo Badlands facility. The Carrizo Badlands look like another planet, a maze of dry gullies and sunburned ridges stretching to the horizon. Few things survive there, but in 1997, a group of off-roaders found something buried that no one was supposed to find. It was early spring when the team stumbled on it, a cluster of metallic ruins half swallowed by sand, shaped like the top of a building, rusted panels, bent girders, faded yellow paint that read only one word: research. No roads led to the site. No entries existed in any state database. The group photographed the structure and uploaded the images to a now defunct off-roading forum. Within a week, the thread vanished, and the site administrators claimed their servers had been archived by request. By the time the men returned, the structure was gone, completely. The sand was disturbed, tire tracks heavy, as if construction vehicles had been there. The only thing left behind was a shallow square depression and a faint metallic smell, like ozone after lightning. When one of the off-roaders, Ben Harlan, reported the discovery to the Bureau of Land Management, he was told the area had been restricted for environmental restoration. But FOIA records show no such restoration project. Later, aerial imagery from 1985, 12 years before the discovery, revealed the same outline faintly visible under the desert floor, meaning the structure hadn't just appeared, it had been buried for decades. What was it? Locals in Borrego Springs remembered seeing strange lights in that region in the late 1960s, long before the area was protected. One retired engineer claimed the facility belonged to a short-lived energy research company, testing resonance induction underground. He described a series of shafts leading to a central core, built entirely from non-ferrous metal. The company, Helios Dynamics, was dissolved in 1972. All public records list its address as classified. In 2004, a group of geology students attempted to locate the site using GPS coordinates from the original photos. Their devices worked until the last half mile where signals cut out. When they reached the point, they found a sealed metal hatch the size of a door, bolted into bedrock. No markings, no entry. They left after hearing a deep, hollow vibration from below, not mechanical, more like something enormous exhaling once every few seconds. Weeks later, one student developed chemical burns on his hands despite wearing gloves. The residue tested positive for trace cesium and iron, elements used in radiation shielding. NASA denies any connection, but the region falls directly between two decommissioned missile telemetry ranges. The Defense Department simply calls it an unrecorded experimental site of no current relevance. Yet Google Earth imagery from 2011 shows a perfect square of disturbed sand at those coordinates, bright against the tan ground, almost like the roof of something just beneath the surface. At night, travelers on Highway 78 claim to see faint amber light flickering from that direction, too steady to be fire, too slow to be electrical. They call it the underground window. The desert has a way of hiding what it doesn't want seen, but sometimes it just buries it until it's ready to be found again. The Red Mesa Barrier. Red Mesa sits along the border of Navajo land and government property, a sandstone plateau that glows deep crimson at dusk. From above, it looks untouched, but at ground level, the land is divided by a fence that no one built and a silence no one breaks. Officially, the area was once home to a Cold War radar site, Project Sentinel Station 12, decommissioned in 1975. The towers were removed, the workers reassigned, the land declared safe. Yet no one ever got permission to use it again. In 1984, hikers passing through the mesa noticed something odd. A wall of concrete blocks half buried in dust, arranged in a perfect arc. There were no seams, no joints, no metal reinforcement. It curved like the rim of a massive ring vanishing into the sand. By the time they returned the next year, it had changed. The structure had grown. Photographs taken 13 months apart show the arc extended by nearly 20 feet. The same pattern repeated a decade later, again in 1997, again in 2008. Each time the barrier expanded in equal increments, as though following a schedule. When the Bureau of Indian Affairs attempted to resurvey the area, their GPS units failed within a quarter mile. Radios dropped signal, and the air filled with a low static that made conversation impossible. One agent described it as standing inside a radio that isn't tuned to any station. Satellite photos confirmed something more disturbing. The shadow of the mesa itself didn't behave normally. On clear days, it shifted slightly east to west over a 5-minute span, independent of the sun's movement. Astronomers analyzing the images determined that the distortion wasn't optical. The shadow changed angle, as if the mesa's slope were bending in real time. A classified Department of Defense memo from 1989, later leaked, refers to Red Mesa as Phase Array Geological Test Site 1A. The project's purpose, to measure how rock formations respond to synthetic resonance fields. No further details were released. Locals report that at night, faint red light seeps from cracks along the barrier, a glow too soft to photograph, too rhythmic to be random. One Navajo ranger who patrols near the border told a journalist in 2014, "You can hear it humming before you see it. The rock itself sings. Then you remember the stories, that the mesa isn't solid, that it's something trying to stay buried." Attempts to drill samples from the barrier have all failed. Bits of machinery jam, bits melt, and sensors register readings as though the drills are striking moving material. Not stone, not metal, but something vibrating between both. Every 11 years, the U.S. Geological Survey takes magnetometric readings across the Southwest. In each cycle since 1975, Red Mesa shows the same pattern. Magnetic deviation rising sharply, peaking for 3 days, then fading to zero. Always the same interval, always in December. The most recent reading in 2021 showed the barrier's radius had grown again, precisely 20.3 feet. Whatever is expanding beneath Red Mesa isn't stopping. It's following instructions. And if it keeps growing, someday the circle will close. The Silent Ridge. There's a ridge in northern Arizona where the world goes quiet. Not metaphorically, physically. It sits halfway between Holbrook and Winslow, an unmarked stretch of volcanic rock called by locals the Silent Ridge. Maps list it as public land, but no trail leads to it. The Bureau of Land Management quietly sealed off the approach road in 1982, citing erosion risk. No one ever reopened it. The first known account came from a field biologist named Thomas Heller, who camped near the ridge while cataloging desert insects. In his 1981 notebook, one entry stands out. Wind stopped at 9:42 p.m., complete silence. I clapped. No echo. When he returned to camp an hour later, he found his tape recorder running, but the tape was blank. Not damaged, not erased, just blank. Even stranger, he wrote that his ears rang for hours afterward, like the sound was still trying to get out. Years later, hikers began to test the legend. Everyone reported the same effect. The closer you walk to the ridge, the quieter the world becomes. Not gradually, abruptly, like someone muting a film. There's no echo, no wind, even footsteps dull to nothing. Microphones record ambient hiss that spikes, then drops to zero, a waveform so flat it resembles dead air. In 1999, a sound engineer from Phoenix brought professional equipment to investigate. He placed a directional mic on the ridge's crest and snapped his fingers. The recording showed no reflected frequency, yet seismic sensors registered a faint vibration in the ground, identical in rhythm to his snap, delayed by exactly 2 seconds. The ridge didn't echo back. It absorbed the sound, then replayed it through the earth. Scientists who later studied the data found the soil around the ridge composed largely of basalt infused with rare magnetite crystals, minerals known to store electromagnetic charge. But that doesn't explain why the silence moves. Visitors report that the quiet zone shifts slightly from week to week, sometimes stretching a few yards north, sometimes south. One geologist described watching a gust of wind travel across the desert, carrying dust, only for it to vanish halfway up the ridge, the particles dropping straight down as if they'd hit invisible glass. Wildlife avoids the area entirely. No birds, no insects, no sound. A leaked memo from 2003 labeled Environmental Anomaly Site AR-12 describes broadband absorption inconsistent with topography. It also recommends continued restriction due to unexplained physiological effects. Those effects include disorientation, loss of balance, and what researchers call auditory afterimages, moments when the silence continues even after leaving the zone. Several test subjects reported hearing delayed sounds hours later, echoes of conversations from earlier that day, repeating faintly behind them like memory made audible. The government denies any activity on the site, but local rangers admit they still patrol the perimeter, not to keep people out, but to listen. They say sometimes, after dark, the ridge hums softly. Not wind, not machine, but a tone low enough to feel in your teeth. When asked what it sounds like, one ranger paused for a long time and said, "It sounds like the desert breathing in. Maybe it's magnetism. Maybe it's the earth trying to remember what silence used to be. But if sound is proof that something exists, then what happens to a place that erases even proof?" The Black Triangle Plain. Between Tonopah and Rachel, Nevada, there's a flat stretch of desert where even the sky seems to hesitate. It's known among pilots as the Black Triangle Plain, an empty zone with no towns, no airfields, and no reason to exist. Yet for more than 70 years, flight restrictions have drawn a perfect triangle over it, forbidding entry from both civilian and military aircraft. It began in 1951, during nuclear test surveys. Pilots mapping fallout drift noticed their radar screens flicker black whenever they crossed the zone's edge. Not static, absence. The screen didn't jam. It went blank, as if the air inside that triangle wasn't reflecting anything back. The Air Force established a temporary exclusion zone to avoid equipment interference. Temporary became permanent. To this day, the triangle remains off-limits, even to reconnaissance drones. In 1972, a classified memo from Nellis Air Force Base referenced anomalous radar void behavior, describing a self-correcting reflection below surface level. Translation: radar bounced off something underground and came back before the signal was sent, a return arriving in reverse time. Throughout the 80s, civilian pilots flying near the perimeter reported instruments freezing, radios looping old transmissions, their own voices replayed seconds later. Some claimed to see faint movement below, not lights, but shifting shadows shaped like wings, gliding silently beneath the ground. By 1998, satellite imaging confirmed a persistent geometric pattern in the sand, a dark outline matching the restricted airspace exactly. Analysts dismissed it as soil variation, but the shape deepened over time, darkening after rain and returning after windstorms erased it. The ground was remembering the shadow. In 2015, thermal drones flown illegally across the perimeter by a private contractor recorded something extraordinary, a pulse of heat forming a massive equilateral triangle beneath the desert floor. Each side nearly 3 miles long, the lines burned bright for 6 seconds, then vanished. The footage was seized days later. Only still frames remain, leaked anonymously. Geologists claim subsurface metallic ore deposits can produce such patterns, but not with symmetrical precision and not in motion. The Defense Department calls it natural interference, but inside flight logs from the Federal Aviation Administration, there's an entry no one can explain. Radar anomaly, 00000, no coordinates. Vector returned before signal origin. Source, ground reflection, triangular plane. That entry has been repeated 8 times since 1951, each exactly 11 years apart. Whatever's down there moves in cycles. Locals who live near the restricted zone say sometimes the desert glows faintly from below, not bright enough to see shapes, but enough to make the horizon tremble. One rancher compared it to headlights under the earth, waiting to surface. No structure, no installation, no access roads, yet the no-fly order remains. The official designation is Airspace R4807X. Unofficially, pilots call it the horizon that watches back. Because if radar reflections can arrive before the pulse that made them, maybe the desert isn't reflecting anything at all. Maybe it's remembering what's about to happen. And if that's true, the question isn't what's under the black triangle plane, but when it's from. 6 coordinates erased. 6 reasons to believe the desert isn't empty. It's classified. A glowing trench that feeds on shadow. A heartbeat in the sand that keeps perfect time. A buried facility that won't stay buried. A mesa building its own wall. A ridge that eats sound and gives silence back. And a triangle that watches from beneath the ground, waiting for the next 11-year cycle to begin. Every fence in the desert was built for a reason. But sometimes the reason isn't danger, it's containment. Something under that dust still hums, still breathes, still measures distance the way we measure time. Maybe the desert isn't where the world ends. Maybe it's where it resets. These zones were marked restricted decades ago, and yet the sensors still blink, the air still hums, the maps still lie. Someone or something is still inside. 6 forbidden places, 6 reminders that silence can be engineered. If you made it this far, thank you. Leave a like if one of these stories stayed with you. Tell us which forbidden zone you'd cross and which you'd never step near again. But remember, if a place disappears from the map,